Every season, experienced captains make the same mistake on Boston whaler hulls. Not first-time boaters, not weekend novices who borrowed a friend's boat. Experienced operators who know the vessel, know the water, and have logged hundreds of hours on hulls exactly like this one. The mistake does not involve the engine. It does not involve navigation. It involves a single cognitive error that the Boston whaler's most celebrated engineering feature makes almost inevitable, and it kills people with a consistency that the incident reports document clearly and the marketing materials never mention. The feature is the unsinkable hull. The error is what that hull makes captains believe about every other system aboard. Let's get into it. Boston whaler's unibond construction is a genuine engineering achievement. Closed-cell polyurethane foam fills the void between the inner and outer fiberglass skins on every hull the company produces. The foam is permanently bonded, structurally integrated, and certified by the United States Coast Guard to meet flotation standards under full load. The hull will not sink. That is a documented, tested, certified fact, and it has been true of every Boston whaler hull built since the founding demonstration in 1958, when a 13-foot hull was cut in half and both pieces were motored away from each other under their own power. That demonstration established the brand identity that has driven Boston whaler sales for nearly 7 decades. It also established something more dangerous, a psychological frame that experienced captains carry aboard every Boston whaler they ever operate. The frame is simple and it is wrong. The boat cannot sink, therefore the situation can always be recovered. That is the error. It is not an error about the hull. The hull genuinely cannot sink. It is an error about the distinction between a hull that floats and a vessel that is safe. Those are not the same thing. A swamped Boston whaler will remain on the surface. It will not go to the bottom. The captain and crew will not lose the vessel to submersion. What they will lose, depending on conditions, is propulsion, navigation, communication, and thermal protection. A swamped 17-foot Boston whaler in 55-degree water 5 miles offshore in October is not a survivable situation because the hull floats. It is a survivable situation only if the crew has immersion suits, a functioning means of communication, and a rescue response faster than the onset of cold water incapacitation. Cold water incapacitation begins within minutes. Useful muscle function is lost before most recreational boaters can complete a distress call. The hull's buoyancy does not slow that process. It does not warm the water. It does not extend the survival window. It holds the platform on the surface while the people on it die from exposure at the same rate they would die from exposure clinging to any other floating debris. The incident reports from the United States Coast Guard and the National Transportation Safety Board show the pattern consistently. A Boston whaler capsizes or swamps in conditions that exceeded the crew's planning margin. The hull remains on the surface. The crew does not. The investigation finds that the captain made a departure decision based on conditions that were marginal but manageable, that the risk assessment included the implicit assumption that the unsinkable hull provided a recovery margin that it does not actually provide, and that the personal flotation devices aboard were either not worn or not rated for the water temperature encountered. The hull performed exactly as designed. The safety system around the hull did not. Now here's the operational mechanism behind the error, because understanding why experienced captains make it is the only way to understand how to stop making it. The unsinkable hull creates a category of confidence that does not exist on conventional vessels. On a conventional fiberglass or aluminum hull, a captain assessing marginal departure conditions carries a complete risk picture. If this boat swamps, it goes down, and that outcome is final. The finality of that outcome enforces conservatism in departure decisions. On a Boston whaler, the same captain assessing the same marginal conditions carries a modified risk picture. If this boat swamps, it stays up, and I can deal with whatever comes next from a floating platform. That modification is not irrational. It is a reasonable inference from a true fact about the hull. It is also incomplete in a way that is operationally fatal because the floating platform inference skips the critical variable of time. A floating platform 5 miles offshore in cold water in October is not a safe waiting position. It is a delayed version of the same fatal outcome that would follow from a conventional hull going down, delayed by the time it takes cold water to incapacitate a crew rather than the time it takes a conventional hull to sink. In many documented cases, that delay is not long enough to change the outcome. The relevant operational response to this is not to distrust the Boston whaler hull. The hull is not the problem. The response is to apply the same departure conservatism to a Boston whaler that any competent captain applies to a conventional hull, and then to add the specific safety equipment that a floating but swamped platform actually requires: personal flotation devices worn, not stowed, immersion suits on board and accessible for cold water operation, a functioning VHF radio with a float plan filed before departure, an EPIRB or PLB registered and accessible, a realistic assessment of rescue response time relative to cold water, survival window for the specific water temperature and conditions of the planned route. None of those requirements are unique to Boston whaler. They are baseline offshore safety requirements for any vessel in any conditions. The documented reason they are particularly critical on Boston whaler hulls is that the unsinkable construction feature systematically reduces the perceived urgency of meeting them. Captains who would never depart a conventional hull in marginal conditions without full safety equipment aboard routinely depart Boston whalers with less because the hull feels like a safety margin that substitutes for the equipment. It does not. The hull keeps the platform on the surface. The equipment keeps the people on the platform alive long enough for rescue. Both are required. Neither substitutes for the other. The captains who die on Boston whalers every season are not dying because the hull failed. They are dying because the hull's most impressive capability created a confidence in the overall safety of the vessel that the hull alone cannot justify. A boat that cannot sink is not a boat that cannot kill you. It is a boat that will keep floating after it has. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. More deep boating stories are coming.